grandfather of the baby now, Merlin.
There's a lot to love about John Boorman's 1981 movie, Excalibur. The light and colour-soaked cinematography of Alex Thompson. The magnificent aluminium-forged lightweight armour of Terry English. That remarkably beautiful cast, Sherry Lungi, Helen Mirren, Nigel Terry, a young Liam Neeson, and the marvellously handsome Nicholas Clay. And the extraordinary performance of Nicole Williamson as the sorcerer Merlin. Oh, and knights in literal shining armour charging to battle to the beat of Carlos, O Fortuna. But the most important thing about this cult production of the Arthurian mythos, the founding mythos of the British Isles, among the greatest myths in human history, and one of the most famous stories of all time, is that Excalibur is the only good King Arthur movie ever. There have been hundreds or even thousands of hours of King Arthur made for screen in the last century or so. Hollywood discovered King Arthur in its golden era of swashbucklers, including the agonizingly dull all-star production Knights of the Round Table, and numerous versions of America's addition to the myth, Prince Valiant. Arthur briefly entered the American collective unconscious when the Camelot musical, filmed in 1967 with Richard Harris as Arthur, was cited by Jackie Kennedy as the favorite movie of her husband, and the presidency of JFK was dubbed Kennedy's Camelot. Many movies have focused on the romance between Guinevere and Lancelot, most memorably Sean Connery and Richard Gere in First Night, a movie so cloyingly sentimental that Richard Gere's career drowned in it. The court of Camelot has also been a destination for various outlandish visitors, not least a famous Connecticut Yankee and Whoopi Goldberg. And Arthurian myth has played out in other times and places, including a high school in Avalon High and a biker gang in George A. Romero's Knight Riders, weirdly one of the better Arthurian outings. There are so many animated Arthurs that it's impossible to count them all. But Disney's The Sword in the Stone, based on T.H. White's classic novel, arguably remains the Arthurian telling known to most people. Clive Owen starred as a Romano-British Arthur in a 2004 attempt to bring gritty realism to King Arthur, but despite some high-impact action sequences, the movie is best remembered for Keira Knightley in Woad and not much else. The single thing that has killed these and so many other King Arthur movies, TV shows, and even video games came to a peak in the 2017 movie King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, from probably the most overrated director in cinematic history, Guy Ritchie. Ritchie's career began at the peak of English lad culture in the late 90s, and he has specialized ever since in movies starring strutting, preening peacocks and Jason Statham. Oh, wait, same thing. Like so many failed tellings of Arthurian myth, Guy Ritchie's King Arthur takes swords, knights, and most of all, men, very, very seriously. John Boorman's Excalibur is the only good King Arthur movie because it treats men as the ridiculous, sword-swinging, angry apes we are.
I must have her. Are you mad? The Alliance!
Excalibur might be the only movie ever to have been made after its own parody. In 1975, the crew of Monty Python devastated the Arthurian mythos in The Holy Grail. Every absurdity, every internal contradiction, every political and social travesty in the myth of King Arthur is savaged by the Pythons.
England. Pull the other one.
Surely, John Boorman must have seen The Holy Grail and Excalibur made a half-decade later somehow never stop seeming like the movie Holy Grail is parodying.
A swallow carrying a coconut? It could grip it by the husk.
It would only take an imported coconut to make Nigel Terry's Arthur near indistinguishable from Graham Chapman's, or a single demand for democratic representation to make the downtrodden peasants of Excalibur sound just like Michael Palin.
Oh, King, eh? Very nice. And how'd you get that, eh? by exploiting the workers.
As Arthur's champions are beaten one after the other, it's hard not to imagine the foe as not Lancelot du Lac, but John Cleese's Black Knight.
Now stand aside, worthy adversary.
'Tis but a scratch.
And Arthur's hasty visit to the nunnery of Guinevere almost has all of the nuns demanding a good spanking. Even as Excalibur's symphonic climax goes on for far too long, with Arthur waiting a ridiculously long time to die while Percival dithers about hurling the titular sword back into the lake, it really feels like Excalibur might be a secret Python project. But while the Pythons ridicule Arthur to destroy the myth, what Borman seems to intuitively grasp is that by pushing the Arthurian mythos to the very edge of the ridiculous, we reveal the true myth of the Sword of Power, Excalibur.
What have I done? You have broken what could not be broken. I've lost, for all time, the ancient sword of my fathers.
Think of Arthur not as a character in a story, but as a being, a little more than human but less than God, emergent from the evolution of myth. I'm being serious. I know it sounds weird, but trust me. Arthur is conceived in Welsh histories of the 5th and 6th century AD that name a brave leader who fought against the invading Saxons. This is pivotal because Arthur will become a hero written to please the Norman conquerors of Britain. Via Arthur, the Normans established themselves as saviours of the true Britons, justifying their dominance over the now largely Saxon population. This revisionist history will be written by Geoffrey of Monmouth, in many ways the true father of Arthur. Monmouth's 12th century Historia Regnum Britanniae, or History of the Kings of Britain, is an almost entirely fictional founding myth for Britain. Britain was in reality a land of limited agricultural value that had been populated by scraps of peoples from all over Europe over many millennia. Monmouth's history gave the scrappy isle a more coherent, more glamorous and fake history, with at its heart the pre-Saxon King Arthur. So, from the start, the Arthurian mythos evolved to meet the needs of certain powers and peoples, the drivers of history. Actually, the real star of Monmouth's tale isn't Arthur, but Merlin. Monmouth found literary fame by writing a completely invented set of prophecies attributed to Merlin. These are repeated in his history, providing what might be the first moment of comedy in the Arthurian mythos. Merlin is introduced as a boy, the magical offspring of a highborn lady visited by an angel. Likely story. Merlin then begins to recite his prophecies. Woe to the red dragon, for his banishment hasteneth on. His lurking hold shall be seized by the white dragon. 4 of Cornwall shall give his assistance and trample their necks. 3 eggs shall be produced in the nest. The earth will be turned into stones, stones into water, water into ashes. The ass shall call the goat with the long beard and shall borrow his shape. Gale shall hang obliquely. Till Aries hangs his crooked horns under them. And Cancer crawl with the sun. Virgo shall mount upon the back of Sagittarius. Darken the virgin flowers. For page after page after page. Which Monmouth ironically follows by describing how the assembled knights were stricken with amazement at his words, albeit that they could not apprehend the full meaning. But comprehensible or nonsensical, it's Merlin's appearance that transforms Monmouth's otherwise dull history into something more, into myth.
All right then. Truth. That's it. Yes, it must be truth.
above all.
The next major transformation of Arthur is with Chrétien de Troyes and other French writers who adopt Arthur as a figure in the chivalric romances written for the French court. The French poet's addition was to add the French knight Lancelot de Lac as the toughest knight of them all, beating up all of the English knights, which is about the most French thing ever. But the chivalric tradition is a romance that covers a dark reality. Knights were in fact the nobility of feudal society. Their swords and armor were less often used to fight each other than to dominate and kill their own feudal peasantry. Arthur then is a hero for the feudal aristocracy, in whose stories they are given an idealized fantasy of their own power and purpose. But a fantasy of what a knight or king is not can also become an ideal of what they might be.
One land, one king! What does it mean to be king? You will be the land and the land will be you. The king without a sword. The land without a king. You and the land are one.
These many French tales of Arthur are then collated and translated back for the English by Thomas Mallory in 1485's Le Morte d'Arthur. This is also when Arthur begins to find a wider readership, and Mallory adjusts the tales fittingly. His Arthur is a paragon of kingship, a moral tale for the king who wants to rule well over his people. It's a little hard to see today, but in the 14 and 1500s, monarchy was seen as a definitive step forward from feudalism, and Arthur symbolized the age's belief in a good king as the key to peace and order. From Mallory onwards, Arthur has become truly mythic, the creation of not one author, but instead a being of myth, emergent from the evolutionary tides of the mythos itself, an Arthur who lives in the collective imagination of all those who dream him. And it's that Arthur who appears on the cinema screen in Excalibur.
Arthur. Ready my knights for battle.
Excalibur is the story of what happens when magic picks us up and makes our life into a story. The magic and the mythos are one. You think those fundamental particles and forces, black holes and white stars, you think all those motorways, airports and shopping malls, you think that's reality? Okay, what's real is the forest and the stories that happen there eternally. What's real is magic. What's real is Arthur, king and man. Arthur is an archetypal blueprint for the male story. Show strength, but make peace. Make alliances, not enemies. Try not to fuck your mate's wife. Give power away and it will be doubled in the return. Honor your opponents. And, well, try not to snap your sword. It's all quite simple, really, but remember, men are ridiculous. From the perspective of the mythos, which ebbs and flows over the course of millennia, men make the same mistakes again and again and again. When your wife and best mate get it on, just let it go. You think this has never happened before? It's always and eternally happening. And you wizard types, however much power you've drawn from the dragon, however disciplined your instincts have become, watch out when the feisty young witch shows up. You won't resist. You never do. None of this will make you king of the Britons or master of the magic ways, but it might help you master your own unruly soul. We're all born as nobody. We all have a drive to become somebody. We're all offered a sword of power of one kind or another, a moment of ego formation. We all make our own Camelot, a family, a business, a creation of life. And we all see our Camelots crumble. The new can only be born by destroying the old. So we all face our own end, our personal apocalypse.
Father. Let us embrace the past.
John Borman stated Excalibur should be understood as a story of mythical truth. This great and wild director took an earlier stab at mythic truth in the cult classic of 70s science fiction, Zardoz. Learn more about that movie and Borman in this video here.